Welcome. My name is Melissa Johnson, and I'll be the moderator for this session. Before we begin, we have a few reminders. We do have a code of conduct that we will adhere to for this conference. The link is posted in chat. If you have experienced any issues related to conduct, please contact us via email at that galeconferencesupport@googlegroups.com email. Your microphones are muted during this session. During the Q&A, which will take place at the end of the presentation, this is a lightning round, so each presenter has 15 minutes. We'll do our best to make sure that we can do questions, but just because of the way the timing works there, we may or may not have enough time for all the questions. You can also use the chat for questions at any point in time during the session. This session is being recorded. You can enable captions by clicking on the Show Captions button at the bottom of the screen. So today's lightning talk includes 3 presentations: Collaborating for AI Literacy, Lessons Learned, and There is a Wrong Way. It's my extreme pleasure to introduce our speakers for today, Amy James, David McHugh, and Thomas Blennerhassett. Amy is the online librarian for education and information literacy at Baylor University. David is a librarian and teaching faculty at the University of Wisconsin-Madison Information School, and Thomas is an associate librarian at Missionary Institute of Education at UHN. So please join me in welcoming our speakers. And Amy, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. Welcome to my lightning talk entitled Collaborating for AI Literacy, Developing Faculty Workshops in an EDD Program. My name is Amy James, and as Melissa just said, I'm the online librarian for education and information literacy at the Baylor University Libraries. During this lightning talk, we're going to be talking through some practical strategies for creating faculty-focused AI workshops, fostering cross-campus collaborations, and empowering faculty to confidently engage with AI in teaching and research. So to start off, I thought it would be good to kind of go over Baylor University's current stance on AI. Baylor has a webpage covering all of this. It's listed up at the top right of the screen if you want to see the exact language that they use. But Baylor embraces generative AI as a tool to support education, research, and operations. Baylor provides guidelines for faculty, but there are currently no official policies in place. Departments have been tasked with drafting their own AI usage policies, and they are at various stages in that development drafting process currently. Our Academy for Teaching and Learning has suggested several different rubrics for faculty to use for assignments that show kind of varied degrees of AI allowances for students. So here is an example that was shared from our Academy for Teaching and Learning from Perkins, Furs, Rowe, and McVaugh. The citations at the bottom of the slide, but you can see that it goes from a red level 1 of no AI use at all to a green level 5 of full AI use, where AI is kind of used as a co-pilot in order to meet requirements of the assignment. And it's much more of like a collaborative approach, creatively using AI. And so faculty at Baylor are not necessarily using this. This is just one of the many suggested rubrics to help faculty figure out how to incorporate AI into their rubrics for their assignments. So I thought I would share that. And then there are 2 studies that I really want to highlight as we're starting to think about faculty integration of AI and faculty training in AI. And both of these studies dive into how faculty in higher education are thinking about AI, its potential, its challenges, and what kind of support they need to use it effectively. So the first study on the screen surveyed 122 faculty members to get a sense of how confident they feel using AI. So self-efficacy, what benefits they see, what obstacles they face. And one of the biggest positives that they pointed out was AI's potential to increase equity in education. But on the flip side, a major issue is that both faculty and students often lack AI literacy, which makes it hard to use the technology effectively. And that's why most respondents said that they're eager for professional development opportunities focused on AI. So the takeaway, colleges and universities need to be providing targeted training and fostering discussions around AI to help faculty integrate it thoughtfully into their teaching and research. And then the second study, published in the UNC System Learning and Technology Journal, also looks at faculty perspectives, but kind of broadens that discussion to include ethical considerations and policy development. Faculty recognize AI's potential to personalize learning and streamline administrative tasks, but they also worry about things like data privacy, ethics, and of course, the digital divide. Like the first study, this one highlights the need for strong professional development and institutional support, and also emphasizes the importance of clear policies and resources to ensure that AI is implemented responsibly and equitably. So together, these studies paint a picture of higher ed landscape right now that's very eager to embrace AI, but really needs guidance, training, and ethical safeguards to do it well. So the senior director of operations for online learning in Baylor's EDD Learning and Organizational Change program, who I'm very embedded in that program. I have been for years. He reached out to me with this idea of creating a 6-part workshop series on AI for faculty in this online program. And he wanted me to lead the first two. The first one being called AI 101, where faculty would learn the basics, and the second one on AI assisted research, specifically data analysis and literature reviews. The remainder would be kind of in conjunction with the Academy for Teaching and Learning. And although I felt really confident in doing the first one on my own, I felt confident about the AI assisted research for literature reviews part as well. But I knew that I wanted to include other experts in the room who could focus on things like AI and ethics and AI and data analysis. And so I reached out to our director of data and digital scholarship to help with the data analysis section. And then I also reached out to Baylor's Associate Dean for Enrollment Management because he actually does a lot of work in AI and ethics. I know that because I know him. And so we did a lot of the planning together and we co-led the second workshop as a team. And it involved some meetings where we got to know the work that we were doing in our own kind of worlds on campus related to AI, and then decided kind of how to best collaborate on this endeavor. So for the first workshop, you can see the learning objectives are listed on the screen. And the information that I was given during the planning phase of this kind of interdisciplinary collaboration between the School of Education, the Associate Dean for Enrollment Management, Academy for Teaching and Learning, and the libraries was to start off like super basic with faculty in the program. The organizer really wanted me to cover ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, Baylor is a Microsoft campus, and Box AI as well as Box Hubs, which we use for cloud storage. The planning stages involved having conversations with others that I would be working with for the second workshop, as well as with the organizer. And I just wanted to ensure that the workshop was as interactive as possible and would meet their needs. And once I determined what I wanted the participants to know and be able to do at the end of the session, I was able to hone in on the learning objectives that you see on the screen and really begin using backward design to develop the activities and the experiences that I wanted participants to have. And so I also wanted to make sure that the workshop was going to be transferable to other departments because I am expecting that in the future, this will be adapted for other groups of faculty on campus. So this is the AI 101, the first workshop that I did solo. And there was, like I said, they wanted me to cover ChatGPT, Copilot, and Box AI and Box Hubs. And so for both ChatGPT and Copilot, participants did the following two activities. Prompt Power, crafting questions for AI success, where they would enter a prompt and then get more and more specific each time they entered it, kind of showing them how powerful prompt engineering is and how being more specific than you think you need to be can really help you get the response you're looking for. And then they would do that in ChatGPT and do that same thing in Copilot and kind of compare the responses and what did they like about it, what didn't they, would they notice about each tool. And then the second exercise was called an expert eye on AI. And that's where participants selected a topic that they felt really knowledgeable about. So it doesn't have to be like an academic related thing. It could be like, I'm super interested in stationery and different types of paper. So I feel like I know about that. So I'm going to ask a question related to that. And then they can more easily check the responses for accuracy, look at the linked sources that the tool provides, and kind of see if they think it's giving them good information because they're an expert in that topic. And then for Box AI, I had them log in, try opening a document that was existing in there and just ask it a question, have some playtime to play around with it, and then create a box hub. So the box hubs is just basically you can put lots of different files in there and ask it questions about the different files and how they interact and things like that. So I had them import some files, but this was also a really important time for us to talk about licensing restrictions because a lot of faculty are like, oh, so can I put a lot of articles that I have in here and ask it questions? Well, unfortunately, our user agreements, specifically with EBSCOhost and Clarivate, which covers ProQuest and Web of Science, currently do not allow for you to upload any article that you get from there into any AI tool for any reason. And I mean, our faculty wouldn't know that. How would they know that? So that was a really good opportunity to talk about, violations of license agreements and all of that kind of stuff. The first workshop, again, was more of a solo endeavor. The second workshop was more of a group effort where each of us spoke for 20 minutes with a total of 60 minutes. And then we had a 15-minute Q&A, which expanded a little bit longer than that, honestly. The second workshop did not include as many interactive elements as the one that I did on my own, just because of time constraints and the amount of the topics that they wanted us to cover. But the second one included concerns to be aware of related to AI and intellectual property, using AI throughout the research life cycle, and using AI to streamline data analysis, which is huge. Like our faculty really are curious and wanting to know about that side of things. And so I met again with the Associate Dean for Enrollment Management and Director of Data and Digital Scholarship to discuss content. And we use Microsoft Teams as well to communicate about goals, outlines, and plans for the workshop. And again, I also found it helpful to communicate with our folks in the Academy for Teaching and Learning who would be doing the last 4 of the 6-part series of those workshops to kind of make sure there wasn't going to be any overlap in the content that we were providing for the faculty. So what's next? This is just the beginning of what I believe is going to be a lot of faculty training opportunities. I've already been going into department meetings with colleagues to share about what the library is doing related to generative AI, giving overviews, sharing resources, talking to folks in different departments. And we're also planning interdisciplinary workshops for the upcoming year with several that are focused on AI related topics for our faculty. And we're putting together more training resources, updating our library guides. We have modules as well that are self-paced, geared towards anyone, including instructors. So I believe this is going to really be kind of the start of more faculty training opportunities related to AI. And I will also just say that one issue that we have had is that a lot of the times, if it's not required, the folks who are coming are the folks who are already engaging with AI, are really excited about it. They're as excited as I am, and they're eager to learn about it. So the struggle is, I think, going to be getting those folks who are more resistant to attend these trainings. So that's something that, I'm working with different departments on, just, trying to share out the importance of making sure our students are, understanding AI and are able to use these tools. And that means faculty need to be using these tools as well. So anyway, that's the one kind of issue I foresee. And then in terms of resources, I just thought I would share the link on the screen. This is an internal research guide that I've created. I do a lot of professional development with our teaching librarians as part of my role in information literacy. So this is our internal toolkit, but it is open if you have the link. And so I think it will be useful for potentially for other librarians as well. There's a tab on AI and library instruction and a lot of stuff if you scroll down, including access to our self-paced Canvas course. There's a special link for folks that are outside of Baylor. So feel free to take a look at this. And at the end of our session here, if anyone has any questions, I look forward to hearing them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amy. David, go ahead and if you're ready, share your screen.
Right. Let me know if you cannot see this, but in theory, it is up. Thank you. So lessons learned from a semester of teaching generative AI. I do teach at the information school at UW-Madison. I'm rooted in the library side, but we have undergrads in it, which is an exciting new adventure, and some other majors as well. So this was a mixed course. It was 3 credits. I created it, and this was my first time teaching it. And it was good, I think. Certainly fun for me, and I believe for the students as well. A little bit of context for it, and then we can dive into a little bit more of just what are some of the things that I was seeing from the students, from the use cases, a couple of use cases myself. Now, this was a non-technical course, which disappointed a handful of like RCS students who wanted something more in depth, but looking at more about the values, guiding questions, strategies, and trade-offs for when we're selecting various tools and potential use cases. We had guest lectures from philosophy, philosophy of technology, bias, fairness, etc. Educational psychology. I've got some background in learning design and curriculum and instruction. Learning science, fascinating area that I like a lot. We had about 20 students. Some of the other topics covered things from a little bit of the history. So fun fact for you all, the term AI, which I do like to remind people is a marketing term, not a technical term or super specific meaning category. As a term, though, AI is actually older than the term computer science. It goes way back, more than one would usually think, into the, depending on what you think, about 1950s. We talked some about intellectual property, which is obviously an evolving and complicated area, and other legal considerations as various countries have different policies and things like that rolling out, and certainly as organizations do of their own. Like many places, UW-Madison kind of leaves us to fend for ourselves in terms of overall things. So at the department and instructor level, we come up with our own things. And so there's a broad spectrum, which can be pretty confusing to our students and other users, just as it's very inconsistent. But we talked a lot about strategy, about impacts on learning and various applications. We saw, for an interesting application, I had a student, actually previous semester, one of our library students, used it to write a personalized poem for his wife, and then revealed only after the fact that it was written by AI. And I think he's still married, but that was a bold choice and helps highlight some of the fraught nature of these, right? If we are indifferent to the types of tools and strategies we use when we're connecting with people, when we're connecting with topics, when we're creating things, that can devalue human interactions and have some negative side effects. Some of the areas that I use to try to frame this as we think through it is, well, how our choices build or attenuate trust, right, between instructors, between people, between spouses, and other things in terms of the quality, the source, the interpersonal interaction. And a lot of that comes down to how we want to spend our attention. I think about this a lot since I teach mostly technology classes, and the constant notifications, the doom scrolling, the literally probably about 500 tabs I've opened at any given moment, things like that. And so attention is really important for interpersonal parts, for learning, for whatever it is that we want to do. And I think that is more fraught than ever, right? Very difficult to have that and to focus it. And then thinking about that also, what do we want to do easily versus difficult? And as we think about learning, we want things to be some amount of difficult, right? There's that zone of proximal development idea, things that we can achieve that are hard for us, that get us more in the zone and flow, something like that, right? Easy learning isn't usually learning. Feels like it. I can watch YouTube videos that feel very informative for ages. If you ask me about it a month later, I will remember very little. So speaking for myself, but it does seem to hold out with students as well. And this was a good opportunity to reflect on some of these things in general. So one of our first activities was have students look at how they use technology in general, how they structure interruptions or lack thereof in their work and time, and what projects they want to automate potentially, and which ones they do not, and what that means in the short term and in the longer term for what skills they are building. Now, I did have ChatGPT try to summarize this one for me. And those little boxes at the top of the screen in case they're being shared. I was kind of impressed image-wise, right? We got something that does reflect all 3 of those areas. Other AI image generators weren't quite up to this one yet. Not specifically useful for illustrating these points, but not bad. Might be useful visual mnemonic device. Oh, and if someone would give me a time warning at some point, I think I started my time a little bit early, so I have no idea how long I'm talking for, and I can talk at length if unfettered, so we'll avoid that. But I would say one of the things that we looked at for framing this is the metaphors really matter, and that's something that we haven't figured out yet for how we talk about these. A lot of our language around these is very mind-like, brain-like, right? Hallucinations, things like that. have it brainstorm for us, and that's fine, but it can be misleading, right, in terms of what our assumptions are about how these work, when they work well, etc. So we did a metaphor tournament. Students championed a particular metaphor from a large list of metaphors that I have shared in a link at the end. Some created their own, and we looked at what are the pros and cons of these different ones, right? How do these different framings clarify or obscure different aspects of these technologies and how they work. The winning one, as voted on my class over a few weeks, was a mirror reflecting society, right? The idea that it is trained on big chunks of the internet. And so it does kind of reflect a lot of that, and that can have implications for what biases it has, accuracy areas, certainly intellectual property, and some of those pieces as well. So that one resonated with students the most, which I thought was kind of interesting. But it's one that I'm trying to be more conscious about in my language for being precise more often than not, a little bit less magical. Visual metaphors are kind of interesting too here, since we just have the sparkles so far, which are not super meaningful. I imagine we'll come up with better at some point, but it's that or robots, and I side on the robot side, but that has plenty of issues as a metaphor as well. Now, one of the other things we did is we looked at frameworks for trying to assess some of this use. This is an example one that I came up with for some of the criteria we want to think about. We talked a lot about privacy. I think librarians are one of the main bastions of privacy in society at the moment. I would say I was disappointed to find my students have mostly given up on the concept of privacy as a whole. Not great. But think about that, and data security and some of these other pieces. Some of the teachers I've talked to hadn't thought about that when they want to upload student content to get some feedback from it. And you can sometimes get feedback from that, but you should definitely not do that with like people's names attached or on tools that actually train on the inputs. So if you're interested, this one is linked to the slides. Slides are in the resources tab in Zoom, which I hadn't seen before. That's a cool feature, and otherwise available, but I won't run through all these. But it's the type of thing we looked at in this class. And I do tend to run through this process myself when I'm thinking about different use cases. I used Claude Artifacts. So our official tools for the university are Microsoft and Google, since we have data licensing agreements with them. Claude claims they do not train on inputs. So I do use that sometimes with anonymized student data. So do weekly surveys, see how things are going, what concepts resonate. And then I have Claude often summarize that via an interactive web page or graph it or cluster it and things like that. And that's pretty useful. It's that artifact feature. Gemini now has this with Canvas, and that type of visualization where it writes the code and then displays it right there does open a lot of interesting use cases. So I'd recommend playing around with that. So in this case, I asked what they thought were priorities in terms of if there were AI regulation. I think you'd get different answers depending on when I asked this in the semester, because there are a lot more concerns about like job market and environmental impact than is reflected here. Should look at what week this was, but clearly privacy and data protection were high on the list of things on their mind, as well as deepfakes and synthetic media. And I will say, I think that's probably one of the areas that we are least prepared for as a society now that with Gemini, VO3, et cetera, the videos have gotten quite good. And that's going to get complicated. Lots of interesting questions around energy use as well, a lot of anxiety around that. Well, that's a bigger topic. Students had it summarized student tips on privacy into a nice little infographic-y website type thing. Does a nice job. Again, this was Claude Artifacts. I found Notebook LM quite useful for a variety of things. In this case, this is for some of the master's students that advise in libraries, where I just have our curriculum requirements so that I could get quicker searching on that specific data that I uploaded or linked on what classes meet which requirements. Let's see what else we have. So there's a lot. I could talk about this a lot. So we've got a Q&A section, and you're welcome to reach out to me at different points. But to cover some of this, I was pleased that students were interested in nuance. I wasn't sure, right? Like mentioned, a lot of times people show up to these type of talks are people who are 120% in on AI and gung-ho, and that can be great. There's a lot of interesting directions to explore with that. But I did really appreciate we had a diversity of opinions. There are some students who we're very anti-AI. So I have no idea why they chose that class, but I was really glad they're there, and it helped spark some interesting discussions for the whens and whys and hows that these things matter. We didn't look at specific tools a ton just because this is changing so quickly. I think anything around like focusing on specific prompt types or tools just gets out of date too quickly. And I don't want to rewrite the entire class every year when I teach it, teaching again next spring. So it's going to be a lot of work to keep up to date already. There was a lot of good analysis. I would say student use is really unsophisticated overall, as illustrated by this last one here. So I did have two students. They got the generic project for people who did not sign up in time of like, hey, write one about AI and academic integrity, the other AI that is top of my mind these days. And they did have each of them had multiple hallucinated sources, even in that. So not only were they not using it ethically, they were using it poorly. And I found both those ironic and offensive. So that's where we are. It was not from students where this was super surprising, I would say. So I got a lot of high quality work, but a lot not. I would say a ton of people use Grammarly. I'm seeing that in the K-12 space as well, and not all of them consider it AI use. So that gets a little bit thorny as we think about that AI assessment scale. I had to get really granular for how are we defining these. And because some students are like, yeah, I'm just using it for grammar. I've got a lot of international students, and they do need help with some of those grammar parts, phrasing, finding the right words for things. But it does really flatten, you lose student voice, and it flattens kind of the quality. So it's hard to tell what's mediocre quality and what is just translated through AI. Now, I do have some resources for you if you are curious. I've got the syllabus for my class posted there, along with some of the example readings. So those are prone to a lot of change. I've got that example decision-making framework. I've got the tournament of metaphors and a long list of metaphors out there. So if this is useful to anyone, please use it. I openly license things, and we'll do Q&A in a bit, but feel free to reach out if you have interesting examples, questions, and weirdness from AI. The slides are in the resources thing in Zoom. I can share a link as well. For my time, thanks.
Thank you, David. Thomas, go ahead and share your screen.
Yeah, absolutely. 1 second here. Oh, time is so precious, and I'm burning it so quickly. I shared it, and then I clicked the screen, and it skipped my title slide, which is important. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Tom Blennerhassett. I'm the Associate Librarian at the Michener Institute of Education at UHM. The title for my lightning talk today is There is a Wrong Way to Do This, Educating Healthcare Students on Utilizing AI Tools in Academics. Let's dive in a little bit. I do want to do a bit of a brief overview, but we'll talk about the primary point of my lightning talk in a second. We're going to talk about who uses AI. We're going to talk about AI in the current education landscape, and probably I should actually be more specific, AI use in the Canadian healthcare applied health sciences training landscape, so even more granular. And we're going to talk a little bit about using AI tools that exist well versus badly. We're going to talk about how we use those recommendations and training to teach students how to use AI. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of specifically, we're just going to analyze my slides together. And hopefully people are not too mean to me because we're going to look at some of the slides that I actually use in our classes to help train our applied health sciences students to use AI, hopefully in a better manner than they were using it before. We're going to finish off a little bit about talking about the reception of the training that we're doing, as well as the future demand that we anticipate. I guess to give it away, the demand is that it's probably going to be a lot more, considering the number of students that are using this. And then the conclusion, which is just the Q&A. And hopefully I can get through this with enough time that my fellow presenters can also get some questions in. So I think it's no surprise to anyone in this room that AI is sort of well and truly landed in the education space. Among the students that we work with, this is pretty endemic. I think part of the thing that really helps here is that these tools are free to use and are actually really good at what they do to a degree. And they can perform a wide variety of tasks, sort of everything from like MCQ questions, short answer questions, essay questions. When you're working with a bunch of students who at the end of the day are really just concerned about what grade they get at the end of their course, AI is a really powerful and it's a really seductive tool. And so it's something that we're seeing being used in the classroom a lot more from students. And we're seeing a lot of concern from faculty members about how it's being used and maybe if it could be used in a different way, or maybe it shouldn't be used at all. That's the number one concern I get from faculty members. One of the other things that people really underestimate is that they run on mobile devices and they can be really well used by students who are very comfortable using their mobile devices. And that's something I don't see a lot of discussion about, where we mostly think about this as sort of like at home on the computer. But these are things that students can do sort of in the classroom on the fly, and they can do them very quickly and usually very well. But obviously, when we've got this new and developing tool, new and developing space in general, it's really important that in an information ecosystem that's growing, we should start providing guidance as soon as possible, that we should be looking for best practices, that we should be looking for training so that our students don't just go into the wider world without a basic understanding of what these tools are, how they work, and what they can do well, and oftentimes what they can do not so well, hence the title of my paper, because there is a very wrong way to be using these tools. And we are trying to point that out specifically to our students because they will be healthcare practitioners in as little as 2 to 3 years. So I think one of the fundamental things that we try to point out very early on is that AI is a tool. It's a tool like any other. I tend to equate it to calculators. That's an imperfect metaphor, but I think that it's very helpful for characterizing the sort of shift that we're experiencing in education, where we're going from something where, just like in mathematics, where something needed to be done quite manually, now the sort of rough and tumble or the more onerous aspects of it can be done using an automated machine. And just like in the classroom when we're teaching mathematics, you should probably understand the fundamentals of math before you sort of dive off the deep end and start doing really complex stuff. And that's the way we are trying to think about AI at the Michener Institute as well. So teach people the fundamentals, give them the tools to succeed, and then allow them to use the things that make all that easier. We try to provide a framework of guidance and support, and that support really doesn't end at sort of lectures or LibGuides or online resources. It really does hopefully funnel the students towards discussing these kinds of issues with us and meeting with librarians and the library team as regularly as they feel comfortable with to discuss some of the things that they're doing. And the same goes for faculty as well, so that we can have an integrated relationship with them. I do end here just saying, like, we support all other academic tools. Why not these as well? I really do feel that even though these are not official academic tools, that we are at the point where they are starting to be integrated quite quickly into both presentations and courses. And so we should really be there with them as well. The other thing that we really want to stress is that, like, you're not just born knowing how to use AI. Since AI is a tool, you require training to use that tool effectively and well. I know I'm probably speaking well and truly to the converted here, but for students, especially students who are very interested in learning applied skills in healthcare field, learning how to use AI is sort of like an interesting and novel concept to them, and we really want to drill in to their heads that you can do this badly or you can do this well. We want to give you the tools to do this well and to thrive within your discipline, and also to avoid any of those sort of like nasty problems that might come down the line if you don't know how to use these effectively, and if you don't know how to use them in accordance with all the regulation that comes along with that. Obviously, while we're doing this, we are also developing resources that are asynchronous for our students to use. This is just a screenshot from one of our LibGuides that deals with generative AI. Both in clinics and placement, but also at the Michener Institute itself. We are a part of University Health Network, which is the largest federated hospital network in Canada. However, there's not a great deal of guidance about how AI is supposed to be used or how AI should not be used, which is the particular emphasis that we want to go for. So we are developing resources, but institutional guidance is sorely needed, and we are constantly pressing for that as well. So I want to talk a little bit about an example module. So when we do information literacy workshops with our students, we do a modular approach, which means that I meet with faculty members to basically build a lecture, or a series of lectures, or a series of workshops for our students based on topics that they think are important. This is the AI module. This is one of the smaller AI modules that we've put together. And this is one of the ones that I would often pitch to faculty members, and the one certainly that's had the most uptake. So we start off here, and I do hope that you can give me some critical feedback, but also talk a little bit about maybe things that you would like to incorporate or that you would want me to incorporate as well. And we typically start with asking the class, which is anywhere typically between 20 and 40 students, how many of you have you used AI when completing your assignments, or how many of you use AI on a day-to-day basis? Typically, the way this falls out is a yes or no in the chat, since it's difficult sometimes to see the hands raised or people don't feel comfortable. The majority of these are yeses for sure. This is usually where I get flooded with an overwhelming number of yeses in the chat. We want to talk a little bit about academic honesty, obviously. So we do really stress that these are powerful tools that you can and sometimes should be using, not just in school, but in your workplace as well. But very importantly, we really want to stress that this is sort of a force multiplier. It does not replace the student, and it does not replace the hard work that the student does. It instead takes the hard work that you do and hopefully improves it and makes it better. And obviously, we do want to stress, and prior to these slides, we always have a section on plagiarism. We do want to stress citations. We do want to stress citation management as well. And that dovetails nicely into the next couple slides. I have very specific ways that I tell students not to use AI. In some instances, this can result in academic discipline from their faculty members because it's at their discretion at the moment. And so what I tell them is don't use AI to write whole paragraphs. Instead, oftentimes I'll suggest that you can write bullet points of things that you think are important and then have the AI turn that into a paragraph. I think that that's a much more fulsome way to use it. I tell them not to write your bibliographies using citations. I believe David had a very good reason why you might not want to have an AI create your bibliography. They tend to be very, very much hallucinatory. And to not create in-text citations. A lot of our students struggle with this in particular. And I just think that AI in general is not none of the AI tools that exist out there is particularly good at this. And we have citation managers like Zotero and EndNote that I tend to recommend over this in basically every respect. And then we give them positive ways that they may want to use AI. And a lot of these are actually built out of feedback that we get from our students who are using AI tools over the past couple of years and things that they think work really well for their courses. So use it to make your writing more concise. A lot of our learners are actually, they struggle with ESL. And they find that it's very, very helpful to have the AI help them with that. Come up with ideas for projects. A lot of our research projects, our students have never done one before, and oftentimes creating that idea or research question is very difficult for them. AI can help with that. I'm just going to speed run through a few here. The one that I really like is asking AI to translate a complex article into simple language. That can typically work very well, especially if you're reading a bunch of articles very quickly. Or to review a paragraph and to make suggestions about what the topic of the paragraph is, or to make suggestions about how you might improve the writing of it. And so that's just the briefest of the modules. 5 minutes, perfect, thank you. So it's just the briefest module that we have. We can go very long with this. We can go up to 60 minutes, or this one typically takes between 5 to 10. Again, we utilize a modular approach. There's lots of topics that we're asked to cover. There's lots of content that we need to cover, and that's very difficult for us. So we do have conversations with faculty members about what things they think are most important. AI has certainly been one that's been popping up definitely of the past two dozen of these sessions that I've given. It's been very positively received, and the faculty members have also said that they've learned a lot from it, which we find very gratifying. We do expect demand for this service to grow, probably exponentially, particularly as guidance comes in from our institution. There's a lot of learning that's happening. These are things that are going to change very rapidly, but I feel like the broad guidance that we provide here is fairly good for students, especially putting a bug into their ear that there's an inappropriate way to use these tools and an appropriate way to use them. That by and large is the most important concept that we try to impart. So at the moment, we're essentially trying to predict what our institution is doing. The way that we perceive this is we're providing a form of literacy to our students that will in the future conform with our institutional guidance. So I don't want to talk too much because I know there's probably questions from my wonderful co-presenters. That's the end of that. I'm happy to take any questions now as well. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for all those presentations. So I'm just going to scroll back up through the chat. So there were some comments about prompts with image generation and how if the prompt, the first time you do it doesn't go right, then, trying to tweak that prompt, sometimes you just have to walk away and come back and do the prompt again to get the image you want. And then also the comments about citing hallucinated sources apparently is a systemic problem with students everywhere. And I also agree, yay for Inigo Montoya. I think, David, you answered the question about Grammarly, so thank you for doing that in the chat. You also shared your slides in the chat, so thank you. Just to confirm, somebody had asked if you were teaching online or in person, Thomas?
Primarily online since the pandemic, but definitely a lot of hybrid and in-person lectures over the past months. That's definitely something that's coming back.
Somebody had some feedback about the module that polls are a good option, but providing them with opportunities to be anonymous when answering if they use AI. I think just because some students don't want to admit they use it because they associate it with cheating, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. We use Slido as well a lot. Slido is one of the tools that we use for that. We create word clouds based on sort of like what they perceive AI to be useful for. And then it's obviously anonymous at that point. That's just an example of one of the, obviously I don't really have time in that module to do a full Slido and go through it. So that's really the abbreviated one.
And then we have some people that have shared things about Elicit, which I also have heard is very good for literature reviews. And then last question, what consequences should be appropriate for using citing hallucinated sources? It's fundamentally academically dishonest after all. And I think that can be for anyone.
I can kick us off with that one. Yeah, I'd say in many cases, it's treated the same as other plagiarism and academic dishonesty. For my class, since they were allowed to use AI, it was a bit lesser penalty of not appropriately citing how they used AI. They still got very low scores for their project. But yeah, a lot of the same plagiarism issues. And I will highlight, because it comes up a lot, the plagiarism detectors for AI, or the AI detectors, are mostly too terrible to use, right? They are mostly very biased, especially against non-dominant language groups, right? Whether it's Spanglish is an interesting one that I've seen someone study, where the quality is much lower than Spanish or English, for example, or things like that. But international students tend to be very penalized by these tools. So I'd say they're worse than useless in general, which does leave us in a weird spot. I've seen as they evolve, we might hit a point where Anna Mills has some thoughtful things around AI in education, and was saying she likes the Swiss cheese model, which comes up a lot in cybersecurity, right? Where you have different layers that catch different things at each point. And so that maybe it's a useful tool eventually in the toolbox to catch some amount of things, but it does leave us in a really awkward spot, because there's no good way currently to prove AI use. And I'll be really curious if some of the watermarking tools evolve to useful levels or not, but not yet.
I was just going to tag on to that with the difficulty in detecting AI writing. We've moved everything to in person. So anything that you could potentially do in person, we now do in person again, which is great, because again, we get that in-person contact with our students, and it's a little easier to manage their exam taking experiences. But definitely the online exams were already looked at as an easy to cheat in medium. And we've definitely moved into everything is now in person as much as possible, and invigilated exams, with the exception, I believe, of one fully online program.
That's interesting. We did for my final project, one that I brought from the philosophy professor that I had lecture for a week, of a student panel. So much like this. So they present for a little bit, and then they field questions from the class, because it's a little bit harder to, you can't be on your phone mid-presentation chat GPTing. That was good. Tricky timing wise and scale wise. But yeah, we're trying to find more of those assessment evaluation models that are live in some way or in person otherwise.
And I'll just add as well, so I work, like I talked about in my presentation about our EDD LOC, Learning and Organizational Change, fully online program. We do have and have had issues with students that are citing hallucinated sources in their dissertations. And one of the things that they have started having them do is like provide the PDF for every single article that they cite in the ABox folder. And so now it's funny, because actually faculty are asking me like, so like, can I use AI then to check the box folder to see if like their claims like line up with those? I'm like, okay. Um, but I'm just saying the box folder situation is like they're checking every single citation, and it seems like it's a lot of work for the faculty to try to do that. But even in that program, even with people with advanced degrees, that I still get them coming to me. I'll get emails where they're saying, where is this? I can't find this article anywhere. And turns out, well, that's because that doesn't actually exist. And it's like, they've cited it. And it's for sure a problem. And it's a lot more challenging in these online programs. We have students all over the world. I have students in the Middle East and Thailand, everywhere. And the kind of standards around usage and just in plagiarism in general, and it's different in other cultures and countries, and so that's already an obstacle. But now with this added element, it's really challenging. So that's my little spiel about that.
I think
Well,
one of the things, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say we're almost at our time, but go for it.
I was just going to say, in some ways, we're extremely sheltered from a lot of the concerns of sort of broader academia because we have licensing exams. You can't be a cardiovascular perfusionist if you don't pass your licensing exam. If you used AI to get to that point and you fail miserably, you still don't get to be in an operating room. So in some ways, we are very grateful for that. But certainly, it's something that we take very seriously while the students are actually with us in the classroom as well.
There's been a lot of discussion about plagiarism detection and how it's kind of an arms race, I think is how someone described it in the chat. And then also just discussions of determining student motivations for learning, which is always a tough thing to do just in general. Well, we are officially at our time, so I do want to say a big thank you to all of our wonderful presenters. Please give them a round of applause. Yes, lots of applause. And I hope you all enjoy the remainder of your conference.